Hello everybody, welcome to Brandy Joy TV. We are actually going to talk about shadow work tonight. We're going to talk about the shadow, what it is and where it comes from, how it's triggered, how you can know what it is, and how to work with it, how to integrate it or reintegrate it, the integration process. We'll talk about alchemy and transcendence, which is really what it's about. So yeah, welcome to a really deep night, a deep Wednesday night. Hey Melissa, what's up? Good to see you. Hey Angela. I'm having some green tea. All right, so I wanted to talk to everybody about shadow work because I've got a lot of requests for this, and my background, my background is psychology. So this is something that I learned a lot about going through school back in the day. And did my own shadow work. And so, you know, I never really thought about how to share it with people in a workshop or anything, but I'm going to explain it to you tonight. I'm going to explain shadow work and what it is, a little bit about how you can actually do it yourself. So, hey Bill, good to see you. All right, so the shadow. What is the shadow? Everybody's like, oh, is this some like dark, crazy, weird spiritual thing, right? Well, the shadow is a part of every human being, right? So we have our conscious selves and our unconscious selves. This comes from Jungian Psychology, Freudian psychology. Those two were actually friends, and they developed a lot of these theories. And they developed them by talking about them and debating about them, and then studying people through hypnosis and unconscious work and everything. So the shadow is the part of yourself that is unconscious. So you're pretty much split into two, right? Most people have the conscious and the unconscious. Well, everybody does, unless you're enlightened, right? So the conscious is what you're very conscious and aware of. So you're aware of, you know, good things and bad things about yourself, but you're also unaware of good things and bad things about yourself. The shadow is not just negative qualities. The shadow is unconscious traits, unconscious qualities, ideas about life and yourself that you don't like, that you want to reject. And this comes from childhood. So when you're born into a family, let's say you have, you come into this family and you're a very assertive type of soul. You're the type of soul that just kind of likes to talk, likes to speak, likes to point things out and everything, right? You just have this way about you, your personality. Well, let's say that your family didn't really agree with that type of behavior. Especially, let's say if you're a female and you're ultra opinionated and assertive, and when you're little, you're like just saying things, and then your family tells you that's bad. So in effect, they're taking love away from you, right? They're saying, hey, that's a rejected bad thing. We don't love it. Therefore, you're going to try to get love from your family, so you're going to reject that part of yourself. You're going to say, oh, that's bad. I don't get love when I act that way, so I'm not going to act that way. I'm going to repress that part of myself. And that way I can get more love, so I'll become more passive, right? And so if we repress certain things like assertiveness or maybe anger issues or you know, just a real excitable type of nature, that can cause passive aggressiveness later. Because what happens when we repress something, it becomes unconscious, well then things start coming out of us in a different way. Everything is very distorted. So your personality becomes distorted. It's not quite you, right? There's a lot of different things to the shadow. It's not just the negative stuff like that. It could be that you really should, in a way, curtail and work with the issue that you might have, like anger issues or something. But the way that you're rejected by it, it becomes a distorted thing. So it becomes a negative thing. So the integration process, alchemy, what we do in magic and psychology, which is all the same thing really, is that you reintegrate those parts of yourself into your personality. Because when you don't, right, you end up with these problems and these patterns in life. You ever been in a relationship and then you get another relationship and you're like, wait, this is the same problems? I'm having the same issues here? Or, you know, somebody that maybe drinks a lot of alcohol to deal with surface issues. Maybe somebody called you dramatic, right? When somebody calls you dramatic, they are not wanting to deal with your emotional reality, okay? Because drama is to act, right? So you're acting out of emotion, and there's nothing wrong with that. Now, when someone devalues you and says you're being dramatic, they don't agree with your reality. They don't agree with your reality. Now, it might be that you have a bit of a distorted reality, or it could be that you're reacting in a way that to you is, hey, this is my emotional, this is how I feel about this. And they don't want to deal with that possibly. So they might call you dramatic, right? And that just makes it all worse, right? That just makes everything worse when somebody calls you dramatic, because drama comes from emotions, right? And when you're on these emotional roller coasters, it's usually because you're not dealing with the shadow. The shadow has been, all those shadow qualities have been repressed down. You don't want to deal with them. And so everything's triggering you. So it could be, for instance, let's say that you're in a relationship. Let's say you are a female, right? And you're in a relationship and you have a new boyfriend, all right? And this new boyfriend is very consistent. These first maybe 6 weeks, right? Let's say you're getting a little bit serious. It's 6 weeks, you've been dating, and you're hearing from him every single day. And then one day you don't hear from him. And so instead of reaching out, you kind of freak out, or maybe you do reach out and they don't get back to you, so you freak out. And now you're dramatic, right? That is an emotional trigger coming from something you've repressed within you, okay? It's not to say you're wrong for reacting emotionally. It's just that that's an unconscious trigger, okay? And so then it causes relationship problems. And that probably came from a past experience where you didn't hear from someone and that was a really bad thing because they were actually doing something. Maybe they got into a car accident and they died. Maybe it was your father when you were little. A lot of times we project like our father, if we're a female, our father onto, our current relationship or male relationship, or if, so we project. And projection is when you have this issue with this relationship, usually from the past, and then you project that same problem onto a new relationship. You expect it. Or it could be projection of your own problems. So let's say that you have a lot of judgment about people. Let's say, let's come up with an idea here. All right, so let's say you really don't like people that like a certain style of music, right? Or you don't like people that color their hair. You have this judgment about a group of people. And when you judge those other people, in effect, there's something about them that you're not comfortable with, that you don't like. Okay, you're not comfortable with them. Something bothers you about them. That's really coming from your own stuff that you don't like about yourself, right? Does that make sense? So these surface events, right, outside of ourselves, they're actually they're triggers. They cause this emotional disturbance, this drama, right, in our lives. And when we become aware of them and we say, hey, that's a trigger, that's the first step in shadow work. When you can identify the trigger, that's the first step in shadow work. There's actually, I wrote down a few things. I was trying to come up with like 3 ways you could do shadow work. There's actually a ton of ways, but I just wanted to narrow it down to a few different things. So, all right. So if you identify that, hey, this is an emotional trigger for me. This person really didn't do anything to me. It was just an emotional trigger that bothered me. That right there says, hey, there's something underneath, right, that you're judging of that other person, you're projecting, that's coming from within you. Maybe you were rejected when you were a child for something you did, or maybe you watched your parents or caretakers reject or judge someone else that put that in your head that, ooh, I better never be like that. It could be a culture of people. It could be just a certain style. It could be that somebody likes a certain type of music. They were judged harshly, or you were judged harshly. So that part of yourself that could possibly like that or be that has been repressed. And so you say, that's bad. That's not me. That's not part of my conscious, identity. And so it becomes a part of your unconscious, right? So when it becomes a part of your unconscious, things will start triggering and bubbling up and causing a lot of patterns and problems in your life, right? So let's see. I wrote down 3 different ways. The first way is, like I said, you can observe the triggers in your life and then really just dive into that. And the big thing with shadow work is just being aware and accepting that part of yourself. So if you can say, hey, you know what? I have a lot of insecurity in relationships. And the reason I have this insecurity in relationship with someone not contacting me every day is because of my past issue here where I wasn't loved anymore. I lost love from someone, and that's what happened to me. So now I have this grief. And so now I'm like constantly worried that that's going to happen again. And that's a repressed part of our own nature that causes patterns and emotional problems and drama within our lives, right? So just becoming aware and saying, hey, this is my issue, and then communicating it to another person if you're in a relationship, saying, hey, I'm not going to scream and yell at you and say you're the bad person. I'm going to actually take responsibility and say, hey, I have this issue, so if you could help me out with it by just being like responsive maybe once a day or something like that, something where there's a little bit of negotiation. There has to be understanding and negotiations in relationships in order for them to work, because we all have issues. And if the other person can't work with those issues, then it's not going to work in the long run, right? So that's the first way, right? Just observe your triggers, those surface things, because when you don't observe and say, hey, you know what, these are triggers, what you're going to do is you're going to go and you're going to self-medicate or take drugs, find some way to escape. You might break off the relationship. You might run off to another city and try to make a new life, and you don't want to deal with the real deep issues. That's your shadow stuff you don't want to deal with. Anything that's down there that's like, no, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to work this out. That's your fault. That's shadow stuff, right? So another thing with, something just came to my head and then it went out. Any questions so far? Oh, good. Yeah, we all have shadow natures, and we just have to work on being aware of them. Like, for instance, another big thing is projections. So, I should probably go in a little bit more about integration. Okay, it's not just being aware, but I mean being like super aware, like giving it a name. Give it a name, give that shadow, that part of you that's a problem, a name. Like, hey, you know what? I just got like super jealous and insecure and I'm having grief. Give it words, give it description, but then also sit with the feeling. So you want to actually meditate on the feeling, and the way you do that is you just become hyper aware. Instead of going and, grabbing some alcohol, this isn't alcohol, this is green tea, but instead of going and grabbing some alcohol or smoking some weed or a cigarette or whatever and just trying to go, I'm not dealing with that, and playing a bunch of loud music, you want to say, okay, I feel this right now, and this is painful, right? And then you sit, close your eyes, and allow the sensations to be felt within your body, and do some good deep breath work with that. So, you could do the breath work that I teach you guys, the bliss breath, where you just breathe very slowly, like you're sucking through a straw, right? And sit with it and breathe and just feel the feeling, and then ask yourself a few questions like, what am I feeling? When was the last time I felt this way? Not just right now, but when was the last time I felt this way? And not just the last time, but when was the first time I felt this way? And that's a little harder. That's a little easier to do with someone that's guiding you like a hypnotist. But if you're in meditation and you're really feeling that feeling, it might come to you, especially if it was something that happened to you after, you went through your emotional growth stage. Maybe you're 7, 8, or 9 years old or older. You can usually remember cognitively because we identify with our thoughts. We actually believe we are our thoughts. So that's a big problem with shadow work as well. It's like with the shadow, I should say, because we create this shadow. Our mind does it. So it's just an idea. The mind comes up with these ideas of who I am, who my identity is, who I'm not. I am is my conscious. What I'm not is my unconscious, right? If you look at somebody's astrology chart, you can see a lot of that shadow. You can see all of the shadow within the astrology chart. You can see where a person doesn't want to look and doesn't want to deal with something. You can see where they project things onto other people. So one thing I've always done ever since I was in school, psychology back in the 90s, I've always said if I judge someone, if I think someone is stupid or whatever it might be, they're annoying, whatever, I immediately self-analyze because of all this work that I did. I just immediately say, why do I think that about this person? What about me am I judging that I'm projecting onto that person and saying that's bad, right? So always, if you want to do shadow work, it's always about self-analysis. It's always about, why do I feel that way? And if I feel that way about them, what am I feeling about myself, right? So that's the projection stuff. So when you're projecting onto other people, you're judging other people. Always notice what your judgments are. What is this judgment? I don't like them because of why. Okay, so where is that within me? The other thing that you can do is just identify any of the traits that you do like about yourself. Now, this is a big part of integration. When you identify things that you do like about yourself, and then you look for the opposite within yourself, and then you try to unite them, right? So let's say that you really like that you are a hard worker, right? I know I'm a hard worker, so I'm a really hard worker. I like that about myself. And then you say, okay, well, let's find the opposite within myself. I'm a hard worker, but I'm also lazy, right? We all have, none of us are just one or the other of anything. We all have everything within us, so you can always find it within yourself. So then you have to go and you just identify those parts of yourself that are not hardworking, right? And meditating on this stuff, just becoming aware of these things, makes you more tolerant of other people. It's very self-healing, and it makes you just feel better and more accepting of other people and other people's issues because you can see both sides within yourself. Right? And I remember with one of my issues, we all have issues. I've had a lot of issues. One of my big issues when I was growing up was I didn't identify with females. I would try to identify with males. One of the big things I did when I was growing up is I was a martial artist. I was, tough girl, but, tough guy, really. I wanted to be one of the guys. And I felt like girls were weak. I felt like girls were just, not as strong and not as, what is the word? Like, I don't know. It was almost like a weak thing. Oh, females are weak. I don't like that, And so I had to eventually realize that being feminine is not a negative thing. But, in my reality, I saw it as a negative thing for a long time. And I didn't even want to be friends with girls. And I had some negative experiences with girls when I was younger. And so that was part of the reason, I was rejected by some girls when I was young. And so that was part of the reasons I didn't like girls. But now I love girls, I love females, and I identify as a female very much now, whereas when I was young, I didn't. I went into the whole goth stage, where I was hating everybody as a teenager and wearing black lipstick and everything. So I understand, that rejection of part of the self. And the more you embrace those different parts of yourself that are the opposite of maybe your judgment against it, then that is reintegrating into your shadow. And so you become more of a whole person, more of an accepting whole person. Instead of I'm just this, you go, oh, you know what? I have a little bit of that too. I'm also this. I can also be that. And it really just depends on how you were socialized. We're all socialized very differently, and where we grow up, our family, our culture, everything makes us socialized in a very, very specific way. And so when you're socialized a certain way, you're taught to judge outside of that, that socialization process outside of it. It's like, oh, well, the outside is different from me. And that's where we've got a lot of prejudice in our world and everything. So when you're doing shadow work, you really want to think, okay, what are traits about me? It could be a positive or a negative trait. What are traits about me? Now, what's the opposite of that trait? And then you try to unite them and integrate and say, you know what, I have both types of traits. I have this love, and then I have this hate, I have this jealousy, and then I have this, whatever the opposite is. You just kind of go and you say, what's the opposite? And where can I find that in myself? Where do I express that? Why don't I express that? Right? Because positive and negative traits aren't necessarily good and bad. It's just that they are what they are. And when you can find a neutral ground and actually observe them neutrally without judging them, that is when you've hit real integration through shadow work. Yeah. Any questions about that? I know that was a lot, right? I probably should have put it together as a presentation, but I just kind of, how do I say it? Threw it all up. Any questions, you guys? Yeah, thanks, Angela. You might want to rewatch and take some notes, because I know it was a lot of information. If y'all have any questions, just let me know. Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, that's my background in psychology tonight. I studied Jungian and Freudian psychology quite extensively in school. That was my passion in psychology. So. So yeah, when we have certain patterns where we are, reoccurring problems in our life, that's the messenger that's saying, hey, pay attention to me. You need to pay attention here, because you're going to keep having this issue over and over again until you become aware of the cause of the problem. Not that it's a surface problem that you're going to keep having, but going deeper and saying, all right, let's meditate on why I feel this way and what I can do to make this right. You can usually tell that someone that is very, very judgmental, oh, thanks. When someone is super judgmental of other people, they usually have the most issues, the most drama in their life, the most surface issues, because they have so many repressed things in the shadow that they don't want to deal with. It's split, right? The conscious and the unconscious becomes very split. And that can lead to multiple personalities. That can lead to ego narcissism, where the ego gets blown up out of control. Another thing you can do instead of just shadow work, because shadow work is working with the different individual shadow traits, you can actually do ego, dissolving the ego, or ego transcendence. And that's a little bit different than shadow work, but it's where you become hyper aware of your ego, hyper aware of it so much that you don't really have an ego anymore. So that's true enlightenment. And when you don't have an ego, you can't have a shadow, because it can't be split, because there's nothing there. That's true enlightenment. So how do you stop people from pricking your brain and trying to manipulate you? I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm kind of, I don't know how that relates to this. Hey, Cheryl. I mean, if you could make that relate to shadow, that's kind of a very vague, big question. That I would need to bring in some of my Ericksonian work to talk about manipulation and dealing with people, but we're not really talking about that tonight. We're just talking about shadow work, which is, work with yourself and not other people so much, But if y'all want to do something with that, that's another thing that I do know a lot about, theories and stuff. How do you let go of your ego? Well, I can do a whole thing on ego transcendence, but it's a lot of meditation work primarily. What we're talking about tonight is just the shadow work, so I'd like to stick to that subject tonight. But ego transcendence is a lot of meditation work primarily, but we can do another one on that. Just let me know in Vibe Tribe. If you guys are in Vibe Tribe, I always take suggestions on Vibe Tribe on what y'all want me to talk about on Brandy Joy. So, yeah. So anyways, that's about it for tonight. I just want to see if anybody had any last questions about the shadow or repression, the unconscious, anything to do with, dealing with your own issues, your own dramas, anything like that. I feel like some people who become hyper aware and have become more psychologically aware use that against the weak and try to tweak them. Huge problem in the world right now. Well, that's all I can read on here. Actually, it stops there. It says but, and that's all I see. No, they're not hyper aware. If they're hyper aware, then they would not be, this is kind of what I've just talked about. The more aware you are, the more accepting you are. When you are judging other people, you actually are very unaware of those negative traits within yourself. So if you're saying, oh, look at those people over there, they're so lazy or uneducated and blah, 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 and judging them, you don't like aspects of yourself and you're not truly accepting yourself. You're actually trying to, it's like you create a hierarchy in your mind, right? Where you're always comparing yourself to other people and how they're bad and you're good. That right there is a split, right? You're saying that's bad, this is good. And so that hierarchy creates a disconnect between you and other people and relationship problems. Therefore, you have unresolved issues, surface issues that you don't want to dive deep into and to deal with. Yeah, so your ego is in the way. It's like this hierarchy that you've created that's really causing the issues because you feel powerless. You're projecting onto other people to make yourself blown up in the ego and feeling like, look at how wonderful I am. And if that person is saying, I'm so self-aware and I'm so wonderful, they're absolutely split. They're absolutely not enlightened. They are extremely split and not wanting to deal with their own issues. If they're judging other people, they need a lot of work. They need a lot of meditation work primarily. Yeah, they're not accepting themselves. If they can't accept other people in the way that other people are, then they're not accepting themselves, So, let's see, I wrote down a few notes. There was another one I was thinking about earlier. I wrote it down. I was like, let's say you have an urge. This is a big thing in Freudian and Jungian psychology, especially Freud, right? Let's say you have an urge. You have an urge to, you feel sexually attracted to someone. You have an urge to have sex with someone, right? And let's say you immediately say, this is pretty typical, right? Wow, I feel like you don't consciously think, oh, I feel sexually attracted to this person. You just unconsciously feel the urge towards that person. So immediately say, oh my God, that person is so like slutty. Look how bad they are. Or, wow, look at them. They're just, I feel jealous of them, or it even could be, oh man, I bet a lot of other people would try to have sex with that person. So when, you see how the judgments start coming out. So you feel this urge, this natural urge, and so you start covering up the urge with issues, with judgments, right? And it really comes down to, I'm bad. I'm bad, and if I feel that urge, I'm bad. And that's shadow stuff. So when somebody manipulates you or puts you down or whatever, they're judging and they're saying, I'm good and that's bad, and that's not me, right? That urge, that sexual urge I feel, that's bad, that's not me. That's something that I don't deal with. That's down there, that's not me. So that's them, right? So that's their fault. Or if a guy rapes a girl and then ends up saying, oh, well, it's because of the way she was dressed. That right there is his shadow. It's her fault that he raped her because he had an urge that he couldn't handle, because he was dealing with repressed urges and desires, and he had his own shadow that he didn't want to fess up to. Or if you're maybe you feel like somebody is better than you because maybe they're dressed better, or you think they look better than you, or they more people like them. All right, all of those jealous things that you're feeling, a lot of times we'll get very negative feelings towards that, and that's that surface triggers, those messengers that are saying, hey, there's something you need to deal with here, and it's called insecurity, and you need to dive into why you feel insecure. And instead of trying to cover that up with, whether it's overeating so you don't have to actually feel like you're not good enough, instead you put up this wall of like, well, I'm just gonna make myself look a certain way so I don't have to deal with real rejection. I just cause my own rejection. That's one issue. That's shadow. It could be, I'm gonna just drink myself to death. That's another shadow issue for covering up the shadow and not dealing with it. There's all these things we do to cover up our shadow and not deal with it, and it just keeps causing problems over and over and over and over again. Insecurities and just self-medicating and all of that stuff comes down to, are you going to just go back to the cause and actually face it and become aware of it and deal with it? And once you do, that's when you can start healing from it, and that's when you accept that part of yourself and you can love it, love that part of yourself. That's true healing, and that's true development and evolution, right? Because we all have the positive and negatives within our lives. Kareem, I've never heard of shadow walking. I have no idea. It must be some new thing or something that somebody made up. I'm not sure. But never was brought up in any of my psychology school, and I went through a lot of psychology school. All right, so thanks for the questions, guys. It was super fun chatting with you. I hope you all have a wonderful week. I hope the new moon has been good to you this week. It's the new moon in Leo, and I believe it's now in Virgo, maybe? Not sure, did not check today. However, we're off to a new cycle, so I hope this fiery cycle is super positive for you. And if you have any questions or you have an idea on what you want me to talk about next Wednesday, please let me know. And I will probably get into some of the questions that you guys even asked me. If you want to go on Vibe Tribe and make a suggestion to me, I'd love to hear from you. Aw. All right, guys. We all have a great night, and I will see you next Monday night on Brandy Joy TV to talk about your weekly forecast with tarot cards. And yeah, y'all have a good week. I will see you on Vibe Tribe and Brandy Joy. So, aw, thanks, Kelly. I'm glad you enjoyed it. All right, bye for now, guys. Mwah. Love and light. Good night.